Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Jordan Parham. We will be continuing within our series walking through our AZ-104 lab exercises. This lab is lab 5 where we are going to talk about inter-site connectivity. Really, we're going to be talking about peering. In our previous video, we introduced virtual networking in Azure. So if you haven't already, I would recommend watching that video first and then this video if you're not familiar with networking within Azure. Overall, this series that we're running through is really meant to help resolve any blockers that you may encounter while working on the labs and help you prepare for the AZ-104 certification. We are focusing on compute, storage, and networking in addition to identity and monitoring, so it's so great to see you along for this journey. We'll go ahead and get started with today's video and today's lab, which again is on inter-site connectivity. I'll go ahead and switch my screen. Okay, so on the left we have our lab instructions, and essentially our use case is that our organization, Contoso, this is going to be a recurring theme, has data centers located in Boston, New York, and Seattle. And these are connected by using a wide area network. It says a mesh wide area network, which essentially means that they're all connected to one another. On the right, I've expanded the architecture diagram so that we can, have a better view of what we'll be doing within this lab. It looks fairly complicated, but hopefully we'll break it down, we'll do it step by step, and it will be approachable. You got this. One thing that I do want to mention with this diagram is we can see we have region 1 and region 2, but notice we're only using one resource group. So we're going to create our resource group. It's going to live in a region. That's where the metadata is stored. But our virtual networks, we see VNet 0 and VNet 1 are going to live in one region, and VNet 2 is going to live in that secondary region. And these are regions that we are going to choose based off of the example, based off of the use case, I should say, Boston, New York, and Seattle. My region 1 is going to be East US, and my region 2 is going to be West US, but you can choose your regions, and we'll get there when we talk about the labs. So once we go ahead and set up our resource groups along with our virtual network and our virtual machine within each of those virtual networks, we are going to peer these virtual networks to one another. We can see we have a local peering because these two virtual networks are within a particular region, as compared to this global peering where when we peer the virtual network from one region to another, this is going to be done globally. This local peering is also known as virtual network peering as well. So let us go ahead and get started with our lab. We can see task 1, we're going to just provision the environment. From there, we're going to go ahead and configure this peering, and we'll go ahead and conclude with testing the connectivity. So let me go ahead and navigate to my portal, and we're going to start by going to our Cloud Shell. We want to make sure that we are in a PowerShell session, and from here we're going to be using the template and parameter JSON files from the course files, and you can find that at the very top here if I go to this required lab files. Okay, so I want to go ahead and upload those files. I will do that by selecting this icon that looks like a document with a down and up arrow and selecting upload. Just be mindful that you do need to select each file individually. You can't do, a shift select all. So we want our VNet VM loop parameters and templates JSON as well. But remember, I can only select one at a time. We now want to go into the parameters file and edit the password for the virtual machine. Overall, it's a security best practice to use an Azure Key Vault to store your password and any valuable keys and credentials. But following the lab exercise, I'll go ahead and do that. I want to open up the editor. We can also edit this file by opening the JSON file on our local machine and editing it that way. But in following the exercises, I am going to open this editor and I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom on the left and find my parameters file. From here, we can see our admin username and our admin password. We want to change this password to one of your choosing. Okay, so once you've changed your password by going into the editor, you can save it, you can close the editor. Next up, we want to create our location variables. So for location 1, I mentioned before that I wanted to use East US, but you can choose your location. And I want to call this location 1 because in a moment we'll be creating location 2. My location 2 will be West US. Let me go ahead and open this in full screen. Next up, we want to create a variable for our resource group name. Okay, so now that we have specified our locations and our resource group name, we want to go ahead and create our resource group. And remember, we are just creating one resource group in one location. So I'm going to say new -AZ resource group. For our name, it'll be the name of our resource group that we specified above, and our location is going to be location 1. Wonderful, that was successful. Now I want to go ahead and deploy my virtual machines and my virtual networks. This is going to be done using the JSON files that we have just uploaded. So we want to start off by saying new AZ resource group deployment. This backtick is going to allow us to go to a new line. We'll say resource group name. For our resource group name, we're going to use that variable we created previously. For our template file, we're specifying its location. For our template parameter file, again, specifying its location. We'll go to a new line. Specify location 1 as our location 1 variable and our location 2 as our location 2 variable. Okay, we want to make sure that this is successful before we move on to our next step. Alrighty, this was successful. We can go ahead and move to our second task. Okay, before I move on, I did want to reference the template JSON file that we uploaded. So previously, if I scroll down some, we said we used this location 1 and location 2 flag and specified the location 1 and 2 variables. In this case, it was East US and West US. We did this because in the template JSON file, we have our location 1 and location 2, which is expecting a string. And we can see in the output that the string in this case will be East US and West US. So if you're wondering why did we supply the locations, this is why. Okay, let us go ahead and move into our next task where we're going to peer these virtual networks that we have just implemented by using PowerShell and our templates. So I'm going to close my Cloud Shell and navigate to our virtual networks. And we want to make sure that we have our virtual networks. We specified East US for our VNet 0 and VNet 1, and for VNet 2 we said it was going to be in West US. Clicking into VNet 0, I want to go into peering, and this is located under the settings option on the left. And from here we want to go ahead and add a peering. And the name is going to be AZ-104-05-VNet 0, which is the VNet that we're selected into right now, to AZ-104-05 VNet 1. We want to allow traffic to the remote virtual network. And we also want to, we do want to block traffic that originates from outside of this network. We won't specify a virtual network gateway. For our remote virtual network peering link name, it will be called AZ-104-05 VNet 1 to AZ-104-05 VNet 0. We want to choose the resource manager deployment. And for our subscription, we're going to specify the subscription that we're currently working in. And it does show that there is no virtual network in this subscription, which we confirmed previously. With this as the case, there's a note here that we can also run this peering by using PowerShell. But let me just go back and refresh, because it could just be a refresh issue. If not, I'll do the PowerShell option. Okay, I'll go ahead and let me see. Okay, so it's showing as no virtual network in this subscription. We will go and use the Cloud Shell and make sure it is a PowerShell session. Essentially, we're going to do what the interface walks us through as far as specifying the peering link name, and we'll go ahead and go through this. So let me make this in full screen. We want to create a variable for our resource group name. We have already created our resource group, and we called it AZ-104-05-RG1. Next up, we want to create a variable for our virtual network. In this case, it is going to be VNet0. We're going to say get AZ virtual network. Specify the name. VNet0. And the resource group name as well. We're going to do the same thing for VNet1. Wonderful. Now we want to add our peering. The same way we would do within the portal, we want to go ahead and specify the name, which is going to be from VNet0 to VNet1. We'll specify the virtual network along with its ID. And likewise with our VNet1 to VNet0. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. So we'll say add AZ virtual network peering. Say the name, which is going to be AZ-104-05-virtual network 0 to AZ-104-05-VNet1. From here we want to specify our virtual network with the flag along with the remote virtual network ID. So I'll say virtual network, provide the variable that I specified above, and for the remote virtual network ID, I'm going to say VNet1.ID. So this variable that we created, we want its ID. Alrighty, this was successful. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So I can press the up arrow. And before I do that, let me actually clear it so that, okay. I am going to say instead of VNet0 to VNet1, I'm going to say VNet1 to VNet0. And instead of VNet0, we want VNet1, and we want VNet0's ID. This will take just a moment. Okay, so we can see that this was successful. So what did we just do within the step? Referencing the architecture diagram, we have created this peering between our virtual network 1 and virtual network 0. And this is a local peering because these VNets live in the same region. We're about to do this 2 more times. The only difference is now we're going to have global peering because these virtual networks that we're peering live in different regions. In this case, in East US and West US. So these instructions walk you through how you can create the peering using the portal interface. I'm going to go ahead and continue using PowerShell. Now I want to create my virtual network 2 variable. In this case, I am going to just press the up arrow to go back to commands I've previously run and modify it this way. And we have our resource group name. This looks good to go. The reason I'm not creating this virtual network 0 variable is because I have done that previously, and I can verify by just typing in vnet 0, and I can see the information here. Now, if nothing shows up, then you need to create the variable. I'm going to go ahead and add this peering. This time it's going to be from vnet 0 to vnet 2. And we want VNet virtual network 0. We want the ID of VNet 2. Okay, we want to create the peering from VNet 2 to VNet 0, so let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to press the up arrow and edit what I've previously typed out. So this is going to be from VNet 2 to VNet 0. We want this to use virtual network 2 and virtual network 0's ID. This will take some time. Okay, this was successful. We'll go ahead and do our last peering, and this is going to be from VNet 1 to VNet 2, along with from VNet 2 to VNet 1. So we have already established virtual network. Have we created virtual network 1's variable? Let's see. VNet 1. Yes, we have. I am going to go ahead and let me make sure we've done it for VNet 2 as well. Wonderful. So we really want to go from VNet 1 to VNet 2. That's what we want our name to be. And we want to use VNet 1 and VNet 2's ID. Alrighty, and we will do the very same thing, but kind of vice versa. So it will be VNet 2 to VNet 1. Oh, I'm realizing you can't see this. Oh no. Okay. Let me clear this. Okay, so we are doing the very same thing, except vice versa. Instead of VNet 1 to VNet 2, it's going to be VNet 2 to VNet 1. We are going to be using Virtual Network 2 and Virtual Network 1's ID. Wonderful, this was successful. We now want to go into testing this connectivity. We're going to do this by connecting via RDP. So I'm going to close my Cloud Shell and navigate to my virtual machine. I'll search for virtual machine. And I want to click on VM0, and at the very top, choose Connect via RDP. We'll download this RDP file and open from there. It is going to prompt you with a window. You need to choose Connect. Let me open it onto this screen. And this is where you're going to log in with the credentials. So it's going to prompt you with this window for you to enter your credentials. You want to use that student and the password that you specified. Also, by default, you may need to select this more choices so that you can enter in this student and a password. You may have some other options just by default. So I'll go ahead and do that. Once we have connected to the remote desktop, I want to open Windows PowerShell as an administrator. So as this is loading, I'll go ahead and put this in full screen. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and right click and choose Windows PowerShell Admin. This is where we want to go ahead and test the connectivity to our VM1. Remember, we are currently in VM0. We're also going to connect the connectivity to our VM2 as well. So we are going to do this by saying test net connection, the flag computer name, which virtual machine 1 has the IP address of 10.51.0.4. And we're using TCP port 3389, and the information level is going to be detailed. Okay, I made this a little bit larger. And we are waiting for the output of this command that we just ran to make sure that this connection was successful. Oh, I do see a typo now that I have gone character by character, and this may be impacting being able to run this. So let me go ahead and do this again. We test net connection, computer name, it's going to be that 10.51.0.4, the port as 3389. For our information level, we will say detailed. So we're attempting this connection and this was successful. We can see right here this TCP test succeeded, was true indeed. So let's go ahead and do the same thing, but this time we are testing VM2. VM2 has the private IP address of 10.52.0.4. So I will just edit this. Wonderful. This was also successful. So within the lab exercise, it provides you with the private IP address of the virtual machines. In this case, it was for VM1 and VM2. But if you wanted to find out where can I find that private IP of our virtual machine, and again, we used the PowerShell method and our JSON templates to go ahead and create our virtual machine. If we wanted to go ahead and find where we could locate, we will, let me go ahead and open up the portal. I'm going to navigate to, let's say, VM1. Under VM1, I can select this networking under settings. And right here at the top right, I can see that private IP address. Okay, so we have already tested the connection. We ran through these steps up to 8. We now want to go ahead and view our virtual machines and go into VM1. How convenient, we're already in VM1, and go ahead and connect via RDP. And I'll go ahead and download. We're going to be doing the same thing that we did from VM0. So download. Go ahead and select connect on the pop-up window. From there, you're going to have to enter in your credentials, and remember, this is going to be the student and the password that you have specified. So I'll just drag that window over so you can see. You may need to select more choices. Specify student here, where it says email address, and the password. So we're going to be doing the same network test that we did previously, and we want to use the private IP address. The lab exercise provides us with what that IP address is, but again, if for VM2 in this case, I can go to my virtual machine, select virtual machine 2, choose networking, and we can see we are using this 10.52.0.4. So I'll go ahead and open up my remote desktop and move it onto the screen. Go ahead and right-click the start, choose this Windows PowerShell admin. I'm going to increase the font size so that we can see it a little bit better. Okay, so we'll say test net connection, computer name. It's going to be that IP address that we have identified. we're using port 3389 at an information level. Detailed. Wonderful. So we can see that this test was successful. All that we have to do next is really clean up our resources. So job well done. Before we do that, I do want to reference the architecture diagram. So I'm going to just go ahead and close the remote desktop and go into the lab exercise. So while the diagram does seem a bit, complex, we worked through it. We created our virtual networks and our virtual machines within the virtual network by using the JSON template. From there, we really focused on the global peering and the local peering as well. From there, we tested the connectivity by going into the virtual machine and using PowerShell. So I hope this was insightful. Let's go ahead and clean up our resources, and we want to do this so that we aren't using up any unnecessary Azure spend so that you can preserve your Azure subscription and the credits that you have within your subscription. So I am going to go ahead and open up a Cloud Shell, make sure that I am in PowerShell. We'll go ahead and say get AZ resource group. The name is going to be AZ-104-05. We're looking for all of the resource groups with this name. So this wildcard or this asterisk is saying all with this name. We only have one resource group. From there, let me make sure that you can see this. Okay, let me put this in full screen mode. From there, we want to go ahead and use this pipe and remove this resource group. AZ resource force as job. So just be mindful that it will take some time for this resource group and the resources within that resource group to be deleted. But overall, if you made it this far, I want to congratulate you on learning new skills within Azure. I'm so excited to see you in the next video. So I'll see you then. Bye.